So, we're wrapping up that discussion. Now let's move on to aggression and violence. I understand that many of you have faced violence in childhood or went through extremely painful experiences at a particular age, especially during your teen years. I know that a huge number of people who've suffered domestic violence, family or intimate partner violence, or random acts of violence carry the imprint of that trauma for life and experience serious, ongoing distress because of it. And the questions keep coming up. Why did this happen? Where does this aggression come from? How do we deal with it? Obviously, I won't go into too much detail right now, because that would make our discussion much longer. But I do want to share a fairly unusual take on aggression. It's well-grounded, I assure you. I've thought it through carefully. First, let me point you once again to a book I've often recommended. Please read Philip Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect. In my view, it's one of the most important works on the nature of aggression, how it starts, how it grows, and why it can reach catastrophic proportions, to the point where entire populations are wiped out. The book describes the Rwandan genocide, the largest in Africa, where nearly 1 million people were slaughtered in just a few months, with extreme brutality. Or take World War II. It was a true tragedy, with real genocide. And I'm not saying that as propaganda. I don't want to go too far into it now, but I'm genuinely passionate about history and familiar with various sources. This wasn't some random aberration. Victims were treated with extreme cruelty. Tens of millions were killed. The 2 world wars and the revolutionary upheavals of the early 20th century, in my view, created terrifying preconditions for a heightened level of aggression in society. I've touched on this on social media. Many of you have read those posts. It's important to realize that our society has gone through deep trauma. There's hardly a family that wasn't affected by these events. They touched everyone without exception. During the war, people died on the front lines in horrific conditions. Those who stayed behind, women and children, worked 18-hour days and were constantly going hungry. These were exhausted people, living through a merciless era when nothing was forgiven. People were actually arrested and executed for the slightest offense. Our society endured colossal strain that is still felt today, because that stress became deeply rooted in the generation that bore the brunt, our ancestors, and it keeps being passed down from generation to generation. The way aggression and violence spread is strikingly similar to a viral infection. I want to emphasize this. When you encounter an aggressive person, think of them as a carrier of a kind of aggression virus. Picture someone who's come down with the flu. Their body aches, they're coughing, they have a runny nose, maybe pneumonia is setting in. Their condition is critical. Can they change that instantly while the virus is active? No. They can take medication and get treatment, but as long as the immune system is fighting and the infection is in the body, you can't radically change the situation. An infected person passes the virus to others through sneezing or physical contact. Someone else, perfectly healthy and full of energy just yesterday, once infected, finds themselves on a path to self-destruction and further spread of the contagion. Please take this as a metaphor. Aggression spreads with astonishing ease. I remember as a child when my father, in a fit of anger, raised his hand against me. I would ask him, "Why are you doing this?" His answer was, "My father did the same to me, and I'm going to do the same to you." My grandfather, who came back from the front psychologically scarred, regularly used physical and psychological violence against his family at home. That pattern passed from grandfather to father, and my father began replaying the same script. The child had been psychologically healthy, but after such toxic exposure they could no longer resist. The virus got inside and took hold of their personality, and the person began to see it When you see someone seething with hostility, or you yourself feel irritated with others, keep losing your temper and snapping at your kids, butting heads with co-workers, prone to arguments. You need to recognize an important truth. Your soul is inherently pure. This isn't your fault. At some point, you were infected with this virus. Your task is not to pass this infection on to other people. Just like in a pandemic, when someone gets sick, they self-isolate and get treated before resuming social interactions. If the virus of hostility is inside you, you need self-reflection. I'm the one who keeps looking for a chance to vent my aggression and aim it at those around me. You might snap at a waiter without thinking, get into a confrontation with an authority figure, or have a falling out with friends or family. Sometimes a person holds it together at work but turns into a tyrant at home. This happens with both men and women. It stems from deep frustration, an inner unhappiness caused by that virus of hostility taking root inside you, and you can't get free of it except through violence, psychological pressure, manipulation, or betrayal. It creates the illusion that letting it out will bring relief, but that's a deception. The next day, a new situation will arise, and the script will repeat. When you're in that virus-driven state, your neural pathways get reinforced. After a year or two, or 3, and even more so after more than a decade, you're left with virtually no alternative but to mechanically follow the familiar pattern and display hostility. That's a serious problem. Lots of ordinary people flare up, punish their child, and then realize they acted wrongly. Tears, hugs, and apologies won't fix it, because those neural pathways are already entrenched. I call this the icy slope effect. Just as a child can't break halfway down an icy slope, once aggression starts, it tends to run its full course. That's exactly how it was in my family. When hostility appeared, it didn't fade instantly. It demanded that all the pent-up anger and rage be let out. A person loses self-control. How do you deal with this? The core principle is, don't try to get rid of the problem completely. That's just not realistic. You can't erase the little hill that's already formed in your mind. What you need is to build an alternative structure next to it, a kind of staircase you can comfortably climb. The key to overcoming weakness is to lay down new neural pathways and strengthen them month after month, year after year, creating a parallel route alongside the one you've already got. Otherwise, you'll spend your life stuck in the same rut and pass those patterns on to your loved ones and your kids. Or you'll keep running into other people's hostility, say from confrontational teachers. The new neural pathway needs a different kind of response wired into it. If the urge to lash out keeps coming up, practice an alternative. Explore. Analyze. The observer state is a powerful, psychologically mature state. It turns you into an explorer, rather than a robot on autopilot that reacts the same way to everything. That automatic mode runs counter to genuine personal growth. An individual should be building new neural pathways and forming fresh responses. Lotman noted that when an educated person immerses themselves in literature, music, poetry, and art, they're less easily irritated. Cultural development shapes a more integrated personality, and neural pathways are laid down not along a single trail, but across the whole brain. A cultivated person meets the unfamiliar with curiosity, not anger. That's why it makes sense to work through inner hostility by enriching yourself culturally and by creating new neural pathways. Learn to analyze what's going on instead of just reacting. If a restaurant employee is rude, watch their manners instead of blowing up. In the vast majority of situations where we show hostility, there's no real threat to life. Aggression is a contagious disease we spread to others. Build new neural pathways. It really works. Another effective method is to disrupt familiar patterns. Pay close attention to what triggers a particular person's aggressive behavior. Which words or circumstances reliably set them off? Understand that mechanism and, whenever you can, step in at any stage. Often the aggressor is waiting for the right conditions to be set off. By managing the situation and preventing those conditions, you minimize the danger. Important note: avoid direct attempts to put out a fire by pouring fuel on it. Saying, "You're out of control, stop," escalates aggression rather than diffusing it. Another approach, one that feels illogical to the aggressor, like sudden approval or an unexpected show of trust, can break the pattern, because the aggressor gets disoriented and doesn't know how to respond. This is about conditioned reflexes. You can retrain these responses within a few months. As for building an alternative to the slippery slope, you won't create a replacement system in a week or two. That's a naive misconception. Build it gradually. Invest the time. Makarenko's The Road to Life shows human nature and how it can be transformed. He turned seemingly hopeless teens into whole individuals who contribute to society. Many of them showed pathological aggression, were street children, gang members, committed serious crimes, yet they were rehabilitated. The claim that people don't change is fundamentally wrong. If you understand human nature and have the right tools for constructive influence, you can transform even people with deviant behavior. If someone has gone through severe psychological trauma, that doesn't mean they can't recover. Viktor Frankl's work shows that even in a concentration camp, a person can preserve their humanity and rebuild themselves. Most trauma survivors aren't doomed to be broken forever. A person can return to their true self. When you feel like change is impossible, no matter your age, remember, transformation is possible. Even if you've been through serious upheaval, it isn't a final verdict. The key is knowing how to work on yourself. After rebuilding my relationship with my parents, it became clear that their behavior stemmed from a lack of love. That lack kept them from sharing warmth with me. I chose to do the opposite, to cultivate the capacity to love and to share that love with my parents. Becoming financially independent and earning more than either of them gave me autonomy and the ability to take control of the situation. Steady growth over the years built confidence and dialed down their aggression. Eventually, they were genuinely happy to see me, and I could visit and offer support without any inner resistance. As for procrastination and avoiding responsibility, it's often a protective response to psychological wounds. Your energy runs dry, and you lose the ability to act. In times of crisis, it's crucial to avoid self-pity. Chronic self-pity locks you into a broken state. Try reframing "why is this happening to me" into "what is this here to teach me?" Looking for meaning, even if you have to construct it, helps you survive and grow. Making sense of what's happening effectively counters apathy and irresponsibility. After a bad season, a farmer sows again. The same principle applies to life. Keep moving forward, and don't let past hardships dictate your future. When you feel hatred toward people who act aggressively, that's a cue for inner work. Engaging with culture can dissolve pent-up anger. Interacting with people who are further along in their personal development reshapes your perception. People like that reframe how you see life. What's especially effective is sustained joint activity with such people. Do whatever you like together for a month or two, 6 months, a year, and your aggression will naturally fall away. In martial arts, the strongest and most advanced master is always the calmest person. Criminal gangs are full of aggressive people, but those people are on the lowest rungs of the hierarchy. Aggression is a downward path. You overcome it through interacting with people who don't use aggression as a tool. When a bad apple shows up in your circle, a toxic person who drags others down, look for the life lesson. But if the destructive influence is ongoing, leave that environment and don't subject yourself to repeated attacks. If leaving isn't an option, and circumstances keep catching up with you, look for the lesson. What needs to change in you? Often, inner shifts bring an immediate change in the outer situation. As for changing your environment, these days, changing your social circle is incredibly simple. You just change it. I recently realized that childhood trauma from my authoritarian father still affects me, even though I'm an adult now. I keep reliving painful memories. I feel for that little girl I used to be, and I wrestle with a hatred that eats me up from the inside. It's pretty much the only source of negative feelings in my life. How can I let it go? People often ask me about situations like this, and simple advice really won't cut it. When someone goes through severe trials for many years, it wreaks havoc on both body and soul. You can develop psychosomatic symptoms. You might suffer from illnesses your whole life without ever realizing their true cause. The soul seems to shrink and become distorted. Our inner strength grows by overcoming hardships. The ability to turn negative experience into something positive is one of the most valuable personal qualities. In Eastern philosophy, there's an idea that an opponent is the one who pushes you to improve. Once you reach a new level of development, the opponent stops being your opponent. Let me share how I managed to mend my relationship with my own parents. I did a lot of inner work and worked through a lot of pain and inner resistance. As I kept growing, I outgrew their influence, found inner freedom, and was able to see them as just people. Realizing that they themselves lacked love helped explain their behavior, and I chose to give them love, even though I'd been deprived of it as a child. People often ask me whether laziness and irresponsibility can be a reaction to psychological abuse, trauma, or addictions. They absolutely can. When there's a serious internal breakdown, your energy just drains away. It's important not to wallow in self-pity, but to reframe the question. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this for? What purpose does it serve?" To look for meaning. Once you discover that meaning, laziness and irresponsibility dissolve on their own. Another common question. When I remember people who were aggressive toward me, I feel hatred. How do I transform that state? Hatred shows up because that aggression hasn't been worked through. Immerse yourself in a cultural environment and spend more time around people who aren't prone to aggressive behavior. This gradually rewires your perception. Creativity and personal growth give you many times more energy than aggressive behavior. You'll notice that truly strong people are usually calm and even-tempered. Aggression is not the path to success. When a psychopath or a toxic person shows up in your environment and you feel emotional discomfort, it's always important to look for the life lesson in that situation. But if it's a Chernobyl-scale catastrophe, you need to evacuate immediately. When the exposure is prolonged and destructive, it's better to leave the epicenter of it all, if that's an option. If leaving isn't an option, it means the lesson hasn't been learned yet. You've got inner work to do, and those inner shifts can sometimes turn things around in just one day. The guideline for changing your environment is simple. Change your environment. These days, that's entirely doable.